Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me is Peter Hayes. Peter is the president of the Spiritist group Love and Light, Newark, New Jersey. And I just want to say thank you, Peter, for coming back to our program. It's such an honor to be here with you. I know you have such an impressive background, and I want to just remind of that to those of you who may not have met or heard Peter before. So, his background includes discussions, lectures, participation in conferences about Spiritism. And in addition to that, he has contributed with over 60 episodes of the radio program Living Spring through the cardiac radio. He's also has had a very interesting role with the Spiritist book. He was in the editorial staff, right,
Mhm.
of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. And currently, Peter, you are serving in the board of directors for the U.S. Spiritist Federation,
Mhm.
as well as the Tri-State Spiritist Federation.
Mhm.
Thank you, Peter, for everything.
Thank
But
you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be
absolutely, thank you. But if this is the first time you're watching this podcast like program, please note that our program, Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the work by Joanna de Angelis. And they're here to offer you and me and Peter this safe space to confront, compare, correlate and expand on our spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, but also bring in some additional insights that can help us lead a better life. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Spiritist Group, Love and Light. And please, if you want to know more about this organization, visit them at loveandlightnj.org. Overall, the program is sponsored by four organizations, and they are AMI Brazil, TV Mansão do Caminho, the International Spiritist Council, and the United States Spirits Federation. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. But Peter, back to you now. We're
here.
here to discuss a little bit about concepts perhaps of well-being, right?
Mhm.
Well-being, but from perhaps different perspectives. How, Peter, can we connect perhaps sickness and everything that happens to this body with mental, physical, and spiritual health? So I would
Okay.
like to maybe bring us before I ask you to maybe explore that, Peter, just to remember a little bit about we're just in the beginning of the aftermath of a terrible pandemic, right? COVID-19, that just paralyzed in fear, but also through the tremendous impact, right? A global pandemic of that proportion. And none of us were safe, no matter what, right? And I'm thinking, what did this pandemic teach us? What are maybe, if we think about Peter, other behavioral or other mental and well being that got impacted because of it? As a matter of fact, even before we think about it, let's think a little bit about other example. If we think in terms of I'm okay, I eat well, I sleep, I exercise, I have good genes, right? Everything is good. I go to my annual checkup, I have a great health system available to me, I am good. Or am I? There are other external threats, right? And just to name a few, climate change
Mhm.
or pollution,
Mhm.
especially in certain areas of the world, right? Oh, the latest one now is do not eat microprocessed foods that
Uh,
will cause cancer. And this is on one impact, right? Very evident. But what about negative impacts from day-to-day stress, right? All the emotional ups and downs
mhm,
and consequent depression, anxiety, or even, if I may say so, unsustainable social economic disparity. We
mhm.
are, Peter, a very, very vulnerable machine. How can we keep this very delicate structure well when there's so much going on outside of us? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I think the short answer is if we can't, if we're expecting to somehow be in a perpetual state of good health,
Mm.
for instance. This may sound really depressing. It's not meant to be, but decay is the natural state of things. And what I mean by that is that the body will not last forever. We all know that. Our
True.
physical life will not last forever. Again, we all know that. But how deep is that impulse to try to act as though that's not the case, to somehow fight against it, to stress out about it? I mean, what about the industry of trying to keep ourselves looking young, cosmetic
Oh,
surgery, all that
yeah.
stuff, right?
I
Uh,
love that. If I may just interact a little bit with that, because it's the one example that comes to my mind every time.
right,
Aging is absolutely unpreventable, right?
correct.
And yet we spend so much energy and beyond energy, so much of our day to day trying to stop, delay the natural aging process. And it's like, it's a futile battle. You will age, and
Yeah.
I'm right there. So I'm dealing with those concepts in my mind's eye. So good example there. Sorry for the
Not at all.
interruption.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I think one way to, if we believe that
Mhm.
the soul does continue, there is a future, that our existence is not just about
Yeah.
one shot in the physical world, one lifetime in the physical world, and then we evaporate into nothingness. If we really don't think that's true, if we feel in our heart of hearts or we know that it's not true, that we do continue, then it changes our relationship to the physical. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that the illnesses that we may encounter are not very difficult to go through, are not very painful at times, both emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
Um, but if we feel that anything we go through now is temporary and is really just a tiny little dot on a much, much, much longer line, then our willingness to go through whatever we're going through now is, I think, relatively easier. I mean, in the moment, it can be difficult, but that's different than if you have the attitude of life is just a drag and then you die and that's it. You know?
Can we perhaps even give an example to that? Because I
Yeah,
love that image of a dot in a line, right? A line is just a series of dots.
right,
But if what we're going through, even an entire lifetime, is just a dot, then that dot is just a dot,
right,
right? We move from the micro to the macro. What is that line going toward? Is there
right,
directions? Is there drawings? Is there whatever? But I think it's quite interesting if we think from that perspective, to understand the the idea that we are not just this, right?
right.
And maybe if we think in our lives, right? It's always good to interject to our own experience. But if we think perhaps, I don't know if you went through this, Peter, but that teenage crush, right? And you're 12 or 13, and you are brokenhearted by somebody who may be even 10 years older than you, but it's a crush, and you think
Right.
that's your world is going to end.
Yes.
And as the parent of that teenage or young person knows that, oh, it's going to be okay, it doesn't change the fact that the moment was
It's
so
yeah.
intense
Hmm.
and it terrifying. But with maturity, right, emotional psychological maturity, we start to look at things from a very a different perspective. And I think that's what you're trying to tell
Yeah.
us, right? The dot within a line,
Right.
it shifts the perspective on how we see our own suffering or our own moments of vulnerability.
I won't go into a lot of details about this, but I remember when I was about 13 or so, I
Mm-hmm.
witnessed a friend of my father's had a brother who was about 16, and he
Mm-hmm.
was in a relationship with a woman who was, I think, in her early 20s, so she was older.
Yeah.
And I guess it was very intense for him,
Yeah.
and she was trying to end it. And I won't say everything that happened, but it was obvious that this was just a horrible experience for him and
Yeah.
was really, really difficult. And it's a little bit like if you've ever been in real physical pain, like kidney stones,
Yeah.
where the pain is so great, time slows down.
Yes.
And it just goes on and on and on. And you can feel like it's never going to end. Of course, it will. But while it's happening, it feels like an eternity. And so, if we don't have any perspective about the either the infinite or at least that long line in which our existence is much longer and much greater than we see at the very moment, because in this physical bodies we're in, we're very limited in our capacity
Mm-hmm.
to perceive all kinds of things. But when we live within that limitation, then it can be very difficult to not see whatever we're going through at the moment as this is it. My life is over. It's like, as
Yeah.
you said before, it's like that crush you have
Yeah.
where, you know, um, and yet life will move on. And yes, there is a time after we've gone through a difficult period in our lives that things will be better, I would hope. And that,
So we have some concepts, right? We talked about a little bit about how vulnerable we are,
right,
number one, but and to compound that vulnerability,
yeah,
uh,
right,
we will meet a decaying of our systems, either by
yeah,
aging
hmm,
or a disease or even some external factor, an accident or a pandemic or whatever, right? Whatever is outside, it will be the threat that will diminish our vitality in
yeah,
from a material life perspective.
yeah. Our
Uh,
vitality will diminish. It's a given. Uh,
Yes. Can we pivot our conversation,
mhm,
maybe because of all that you have done in Spiritism? Can you maybe tell our viewers today a little bit about some of those concepts of Spiritism that are fundamental in this discussion? And maybe what I'm just to remind a little bit of some of the things that I think would be good for us to talk further are maybe the concept of different bodies. Yes,
mhm,
different bodies. Maybe a concept that I think is critical for us to understand why we even get sick, right? Which is
right,
the current state of our spiritual evolution, which is called living in the world of trials and expiations, or trials and atonement, and
Mhm.
finally the whole notion of uh, cause and effect, or karma, if you will.
Right.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about it, and how do those three or more concepts, spiritist concepts, can reverse perhaps how we look at those external factors that will impact our healthy living as a
Okay.
material person, right? A material existence.
To be a spiritist, there's a few things that are essential.
Hmm.
I think one has to believe that God exists, that there is some kind of God, all knowing, all powerful, a God that is compassionate, a God that is forgiving. That's one. Also, to be a spiritist, I think one has to believe and truly feel that we have a spirit and that the spirit does continue, that the spirit is immortal. And that means that being a spiritist is embracing reincarnation. Yet, Spiritism also believes in following the teachings of Jesus, and therefore it embraces Christianity. But Spiritism also has elements of Buddhism and Hinduism in it. When we think about the process of trying to let go, which is what we're really talking about today.
Hmm.
When we learn how to let go of, say, our relationship to the physical and not to be overly attached.
That's
It
a
does
very good point. Yeah.
not mean we shun everything, but we have to put it in its perspective that everything, part of what being a spiritist means is this: everything we have here in the physical lives, our bodies, the families we're currently in, our jobs, whether we have any, whatever our economic situation is, our status in society, all of that is temporary, and all of it is an opportunity to learn all kinds of lessons. We learn certain lessons based upon the status we have in society, our economic status, our social status. We learn all kinds of lessons through the kinds of families that we're born into, the kind of people we have in our families. What about the bodies that we're in? The body types, you had mentioned body types before. Any
Hmm.
body type we have, whatever uh, we're going through in our bodies, all kinds of lessons. And I think that's a lot of what it means to be a spiritist, is to learn how to be in harmony with that, meaning that we learn how to accept what we're going through at the moment without rebelling against it and acting as though we're just being punished.
Mm.
Another important point that Spiritism emphasizes is to see everything we go through as an opportunity rather than just dread, I'm being punished, the world is a miserable place kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it's and when I say that, I don't mean that we're somehow Pollyanna about everything, and we're having this phony idea that everything is wonderful and beautiful and so forth. Of course, life is difficult, but again, everything we go through is an opportunity to learn. And if we have the strength to get through it as best we can, then we will be that much better off down the road because we have had the ability to complete the task of whatever is in front of us. It's really whatever journey we're on. And every single one of us has a unique journey that is relevant to our history. It's relevant to, um, so when I say relevant to our history, you mentioned karma before. Well,
Hmm.
Spiritism, of course, believes in reincarnation and strongly believes in cause and effect. But when people think about karma, sometimes they automatically think of something kind of punitive, and it's really
Or,
not.
or even equal, right? Eye for an eye.
eye for
very linear approach.
right,
I've done this and I get exactly a mirror in opposite direction,
right.
cause and effect, right? To what I've done. Yeah.
Yeah. I think karma, as understood in Spiritism, is kind of like God in being, um, God has created a structure for us. God has created a way of life with its boundaries. It's up to us to learn how to operate within those boundaries. We have free will. Spiritism stresses a lot the importance of free will, but that doesn't mean we can just do whatever we feel like. Well, we can do a lot of things, but we shouldn't be terribly surprised if we run up against a consequence that is a reaction to whatever our action was. And as you were just saying, Marcia, it's not necessarily an eye for an eye type thing. If we did something really bad, let's say we committed a terrible crime, well, if we, depending upon how we react to that, depending upon whether or not we do anything at all to somehow make amends for it, that's different than if we completely got away with it, have no regrets whatsoever, don't apologize for anything ever, and have this very kind of self-serving, egocentric, self-righteous attitude of I'm right and everybody else is, the heck with everybody else, you know. So if we go through life like that, that's one consequence, which may be a very severe one, versus
Uh-huh.
we have a lot of regrets. I have a lot of regrets. I really do feel badly that I did this thing in my past, and I'm trying to do something to make up for it. Did you ever see the movie Gandhi?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember that scene near the end when India has its independence and, of course, chaos breaks out because all
Yes.
Hindus and Muslims are now killing each other. Their tribal
Hmm.
warfare is unleashed. And Gandhi goes on a hunger strike in protest of the violence because he says Hindus and Muslims must learn how to live together in harmony.
Hmm.
He's in a tent and he's not eating. He's on a hunger strike and he's slowly starving to death. And there's this man who comes in and throws some food at him and says, "Eat, I don't want your suffering on my conscience." And then the guy says, "I just bashed a baby's head in and killed it." And Gandhi kind of goes, "Why?" And the man said, and he's staring at Gandhi with these eyes like this. He says, "I don't know." And so the guy doesn't know why he killed. He just did it. He was caught up in a moment. He just killed a baby. And then he said, "I'm going to basically be punished forever. My life is over. I have no way. I cannot redeem myself." And then Gandhi says, "I know a way. Go out and find the first child you can that's an orphan and raise them
Yeah.
as your own and stay
Child.
with
Yeah.
them."
Yeah.
And so that's different than if you just killed somebody and then went on with your life and didn't do anything. So our intentions, one of the things about Spiritism is our intentions are really important. And that in itself is a very complex subject because I mean our intentions have all kinds of resonances within us, right?
Into the topic of at hand, right?
Yeah,
Into our health and well-being.
yeah,
I think we you brought about reincarnation and law, cause and effect, and maybe if I can try to explain this idea of live in a world of trials and expiations,
mhm,
Peter,
yeah,
which is a concept, and it's academic, right? It's a concept to help us understand the very long evolutionary path that we all have, regardless of creed, of uh, birthplace or age, gender, etc., etc. We all go through some evolving, right? Something that will help us, lead us to evolve spiritually.
Hmm.
And in that in itself, one of the key concepts in this evolution is awareness of the harm that I'm causing. I think, remember when we talked a little bit a couple of times when we met before,
Hmm.
about good and evil, right? Or as I call it, evil is anything that is how I may have harmed or caused pain to somebody else or to me, right? So
Right.
that evil, quote unquote, evil is has consequences that must be confronted. Psychologically speaking, um, those can be, and you mentioned very briefly, it can be confronted by repressing that
Mhm.
guilt, right,
Right.
into your shadow,
Hmm.
or projecting onto others in terms of defense mechanism. I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to project. And there's many different of elements for escaping. But regardless of what you're doing to yourself with the act, um, there is, and those are my terms,
Hmm.
Peter. There's a almost 100% mathematical equation called divine justice, which applies through the law of cause and effect
Hmm.
to the point that you are responsible for every act, for every thought, for every word, for every omission, if you will. So we are creators or co-creators of our reality from
Hmm.
that perspective, because if everything I do or don't do, there is a consequence to it.
Right.
My choice today will lead to tomorrow a consequence, right?
Yeah.
And from a world of trials and expiations simply means that we are faced incarnation by incarnation to go through and learn,
Hmm.
right? Learn from that event.
Right.
And if the only way to learn, say the in the movie Gandhi, for the guy that killed a child and he doesn't even know why, if
Hmm.
the only way to learn about the pain that he had caused to the parents of that child and to the child is to perhaps lose his own child, it could be it. But instead, Gandhi teaches love and forgiveness and
Hmm.
nonviolence. So he says you can learn by loving another child. And I
Right.
think it's very important for us to understand, unlike Eastern definitions of karma, this spiritist definition, cause and effect, is one that does not really reflect that mirror, that eye for an eye, right? It's all about the concept of moving on in our evolutionary path toward our own state of angelitude. But as
It's a,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was about to say it's a different kind of mirror in a way. It's not the eye for an eye mirror, but more um, uh, the mirror of limitations that we
Mhm.
run up against.
I
And
like that. Yeah.
and underlining all of it is God's compassion, because we have to do our part, as you said. Very important point about spiritism. Responsibility matters.
Yeah.
All of us are personally responsible for the things that we do or don't do, is often the case. But if we don't uh, get to where we're trying to go, or, well, we may not know where we're trying to go, but if we fall short in our progress, we will have another opportunity.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes,
so that's,
absolutely. Yeah.
and and the argument for that is that it's again part of God's compassion. It's not we have only one chance to get everything right or else.
Yes.
Uh,
So let's go to right. We talked about vulnerability of the body. We talked about spiritist concepts inherent in understanding. why we're here even talking about, which is that sense of securing our health and well-being.
Yeah.
So can you maybe, Peter, explore the notion of what Joanna de Angelis brings of love therapy? I've heard love therapy before, but I
Okay.
keep finding time and time again Joanna de Angelis bringing that concept of love therapy as the ultimate goal for all of us, right?
Okay.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit about it? How do I even go through this type of therapy?
Well, one thing Joanna de Angelis stresses a lot is self-love.
Mhm.
And what she means by that, in part, is first of all, that we do our best to connect to ourselves and who we really are. But also, when we talk about self love, it's for instance, when Jesus says you must love God with all your heart and all your might, and your neighbor as yourself. And
Yeah.
Joanna de Angelis stresses that this does not, when we learn to love ourselves and have self-love, this is not egocentric impulses, this is not narcissism. This is developing a healthy relationship with ourselves, which we all need. That we need to know how to love ourselves so that we can be able to love one another and help one another and engage in charity and so forth. So really, it begins with going inward that way and accepting who we are. And she says something really interesting about the relationship between self love and connecting to reality, which none of us can escape. And I think
Mhm.
what she means by that, by reality, is what we were saying before, that there are limitations to the physical world that we operate in, that our bodies have physical limitations. And therefore, love of ourselves, self love is important, but it's not a guarantee that if I just have like a healthy attitude about everything, that I'm never ever going to get sick.
Mhm.
That's not true. We will at some point run into the limitations of our bodies. We can
Right.
have a healthy relationship with ourselves and still possibly get ill. But she also points out that self-love is really, really, really important in terms of developing a healthier environment for our bodies, because I think these days there's a lot of understanding in the medical field. I'm not an expert on this by any means, but there's a more of an awareness and acknowledgement of the relationship between our emotional health and our physical health. And that if we don't have a relatively healthy emotional outlook on life, self love included, of course, then when we don't, those things can have an effect on our physical health. I think an obvious one would be if we're habitually angry, habitually stressed out about everything. Very likely that's going to take its toll on us physically at some point.
At a very cellular level, right? At a
Yeah,
very organic, to certain parts of our body that it just fail, and we have
right.
no idea what happened. But it all comes from how we how we deal with those environmental stressors, right?
Right.
How do we do? Am I forever ungrateful? Am I forever bitter? Am I forever
Mhm.
resentful? And from a psychological perspective, all those types of attitudes that are behavioral in essence really demonstrate a lot inside of us that we haven't been able to really confront or accept. And so self-love to me, Peter, is
Mhm.
really a notion of becoming perhaps curious, right,
Mhm. Yeah,
with ourselves to understand why do I behave this way? Why don't I behave this way? What are
right.
my triggers? Why I like everybody, but I'm just joking here, Peter. But whenever I see Peter, I go like, ugh, something
Yeah,
is wrong. And
I
if
do
Peter
too.
just if Peter just sneezes, I get really angry.
Yeah.
Versus people, we do that to people. We become very we dilute the people that we love. We dilute their misgivings, and the people that we don't like, we augment it, we take it out of proportion, and it's that biased view of people for a
Mhm.
reason that sometimes we don't even understand, right? But this love therapy is super cool for us to understand, because it will, according to what do we understand, it will be the gateway for that well-being, that health. And if you think in terms of, and we didn't, I don't know if you talked before about the three different bodies, right, Peter? In terms of we have a spiritual essence, our spirit,
Mhm.
our physical body. We can understand
Right.
that, but Spiritism brings this notion of a in between body
There-
that's semi material, semi spiritual, called the
right.
perispirit. And interesting enough, it is in this body, not in our physical body, that perhaps the blueprint for physical illnesses are recorded,
Yeah.
and they reflect what we bring from us in this earlier in our life, or even before this existence,
Right.
right? So even for that love therapy is critical, because we can heal through healing our perispirit, through healing our spirit. We're able to then heal, as a consequence, as a direct result, our physical body.
Right.
Anything else that we can bring it up for those who are here with us today, listening to this podcast?
Well, when Spiritism talks about the Paris spirit,
Hmm.
it's as you said, it's the link between the physical body and the soul, so to speak.
Yeah,
And therefore, the Paris spirit stays with the soul. It's like the body of the soul, if you will.
yeah.
Comes from the word perisperm, which is the membrane of a seed between the seed and the shell. And the paraspirit and the soul, as you said, the paraspirit is kind of where we store the consequences of who we are.
The
Our
memory, right? If you could speak with a different word, yeah.
our thoughts, our intentions, our actions get recorded in the paraspirit. And Joanna de Angelis says that this has an effect on our body. In fact, as we go through different incarnations, um, the kind of paraspirit we have plays a role in affecting the kind of bodies that we have. Now, I realize that's quite a statement to make. I mean, if, can that be proven by science? Well, I would say no, not at the moment.
Not yet, yeah.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if it could eventually, you know, find that there is a connection in this way? But really, the implications of this is that our attitudes, our thoughts, our feelings do play an important role in the the way in which we experience the physical world, which certainly includes the kind of bodies we have and the relationship that we have with our bodies. And if I may, just sort of loop back a little bit to what we were talking about at the beginning about the relationship between our emotional health and our physical health. A lot of it has to do with control, or not control, should I say, because if we're trying to control things and we get upset when things change physically, emotionally, whatever, um, then we're going to have a much harder time with it. But if we can learn how to be more accepting of the the, the fact that we're constantly in transition, the impermanence of the physical world, can we learn to be at peace with that? And there's lots of ways to think about this. I don't want to, get off the subject, but For instance, when we talk about money, people often define themselves by their relationship to money, but money is really just a tool.
Yeah.
It's neither good nor bad. It's just a tool. It's something that we learn from, uh, and money is energy, but it's not the thing that if we try to define our sense of self-importance based upon money in some way, that sounds like a recipe to be miserable.
Well,
So
it's at a minimum, Peter, inauthentic, right?
inauthentic, yes,
Yeah, and what I mean by that is it's very time bound to this life that we live in a capitalist world, say,
right.
right, where capital, money,
Hmm.
access to things through money is it's not it does not define who you are,
Right.
but relative to this system that we live, it may very easily
Oh, sure.
right? But it's this. I think we mentioned earlier today this sense of curiosity
Hmm.
through self-love, right, or love therapy.
Right.
Um, we should also really look for authenticity of our emotions or feelings,
Right.
so that we can also, in the sense of curiosity, learn about who we are,
Right.
how, and we learn that not by how much money I have in my wallet, but
Correct.
how do I feel, and that language of a feeling, that language of love, that language of emotion is foreign to many people, right?
Right.
And I think that's an area that we should start
Hmm.
to invest our time in
Hmm.
learning about ourselves, and how we react to certain things without a label of good or bad. It's just it is what it is, right?
Right.
It is how we react, how we emote, if you will.
Hmm. And just a quick comment about money. And Spiritism has a lot of positive things to say about money. It doesn't say money's bad because of
Hmm.
material. What it says is that uh, what we do with money, how we use it, that's what matters. And there are a lot of positive ways to put money to work that we can learn in the process from. And in a way, that I think that's similar to our relationship to our bodies and our physical health. Um, because at the end of the day, the limitations of our bodies, we cannot avoid that. We should not be surprised if we're going to encounter some kind of illness. Hopefully, we won't. It won't be too bad. But can we learn to accept whatever situation we're in and do our best to not only get through it, but also to appreciate the ways in which whatever we're experiencing physically, that we will get through it, as I mentioned before, and that we will learn, and that there's a reason for why this is happening. We may not fully understand it, we probably don't, but we will later on. And so that's part of what it means to have faith, right?
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I don't understand this illness I have, but I do feel it's not gratuitous either. There's a reason.
Yes, I love that. The concept that if I am going through the experience,
Mhm.
it's not coincidental. There is a reasoning, there's a planning, if you will, behind
Mhm.
it. And the outcome of everything is not just nothingness. The outcome is our growth and maturity.
Right.
But I just wanted to start to maybe to conclude this conversation, Peter, with the idea that you mentioned before, right? Why do we get down? How do we get depressed? How do we get anxious even
Mhm.
whenever and it doesn't have to be you, but it can be a family member or friend, right? Whenever we're confronted with the physical limitations that are inherent to the body that we inhabit right now. There is a direct connection. This body equals decay. You said it quite well in the beginning.
Mm.
But how to best let go of those the need to control what is uncontrollable? Why are we I'm not sure if this is the best way to say it, Peter, but how are we conned into spending so much effort in, say, trying to slow down aging? Why do are we put in a position to obsess, to spend all of our brain or all of our potentiality of growth and doing amazing things, right? We in this existence, and yet we digress or we distract ourselves from doing so much more by focusing things that are irrelevant in the grand scheme of things.
Well, those are great questions. I'm not sure I have answers for all of them, but I think part of it is fear. When we're trying to hang on to our youth, so to speak, in spite of aging, how much of that is related to fear?
Hmm.
Is the fear simply because we don't think there's any tomorrow, or is it fear about something else? Is it
Correct. Yeah.
perhaps connected to the unrealistic social norms that we've created, in which, I'm only appealing if I look young. I'm only appealing if I'm active and have lots of vitality at all times. Of course, we want these things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking care of our physical health and trying to look our best. But are we so attached to that impulse that when we see imperfections in ourselves, we fall apart? Because some people get really upset, right? If they don't feel like they look as well as they want to look or think they should look.
Hmm.
Who's
And I
judging?
think,
You know.
yeah, and there's a an article that was published many years ago by Allan Kardec in one of his books that was published after he passed, right? That it's one of the chapters that was really an article that he was writing, but it's beautiful, Peter, because he talks about um, the articles as the aristocracies, right? So,
Mm.
what is the aristocracy? And when we think about aristocrats, we think about a time in the perhaps post medieval time when royalty and the concept of blue blood and those were of a lineage will be powerful versus everybody else outside of that lineage.
Right.
But then he brings about how historically, and it's available, this is nothing that's been hidden, it's that information is available to all of us to process how those so-called aristocracies evolved through time in our humanity's history. So from the warrior that power came from,
Mm-hmm.
sheer mass and skill in hunt, right? In being a warrior and protecting your clan, and then moves on into the elderly who knew what were the secrets, for instance, in ensuring that in a new agricultural culture we would be able to sustain ourselves by learning the secrets of what grows and what doesn't, how to deal with food, et cetera, et cetera. And this keeps going until today. And our aristocracy, I think it is changing, right? From a world of, you mentioned money or power through wealth,
Mm-hmm.
into now this new aristocracy, which is the aristocracy of education, of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But let us not be fooled. The knowledge, it's really not about facts, but it is about uh, knowledge and really truths that go beyond me and you and my interpretation of what's going on. Those are eternal truths, if you will.
Yeah. Mm.
And through that, when we start to capture that, then we're better equipped to really um, exercise that self-love that Joanna de Angelis speaks so much. That g- get in the love therapy that is all accepting of others, of ourselves, of all of our existence, all that this context, this dot in that line, right? In all the um, what does it reflect today? Do you want to give us a final words about what we're talking about today, Peter?
Okay. Well, as you were talking just now, if I
Uh-huh.
piggyback a little bit on uh, education and knowledge, uh, I have a background in theater, and years ago, I remember going to a conference in Austin. It was, and I got to hear the former mayor of Austin, one who played a sizable role in the transformation of that city. And the thing he was stressing in this talk of his was, what's the asset most important nowadays? Economic asset. His answer was creativity. We had we had agriculture, the industrial revolution, and so
Correct.
forth. But
Hmm.
what he was emphasizing is our capacity to think creatively, to think. I hate to use the word outside of the box, but
Let's
that
do it. Let's do
yeah,
it.
we'll do it. But the point is that that skill set is a very important one, because creativity can be used in a lot of things. I'm not necessarily talking about artistic creativity. It's not everybody's going to be an artist or a painter or a sculptor or a writer. But regardless of what field you're in, is there not an important need to learn how to create, how to think creatively, and to know how to. I think part of what it means to think creatively is not be afraid to question everything that one is doing, the environment one's working in, and ask, can we do this better? Maybe we need
Yes.
to really deconstruct it. Not, well, or maybe we need to start all over or really transform what we're doing. Because when we lock into, this is how we've done it for decades and this is how we're going to keep doing it, that's, a recipe for not being able to adapt, and certainly not to succeed, because it's invitation to stagnation as well.
Yes. And we, you and I, all of us
Mm,
here, have one reason to be alive.
mhm,
And according to Joanna de Angelis, it's the perfect happiness. And
mhm,
perfect happiness speaks of well being,
mm,
it speaks of being able to letting go. It
right.
speaks of self love,
Mm,
love all around us, and understanding that we are not alone. We are part of this much larger community of souls all
that's
around us. And to be able to love with all of our intricate differences, right? Our uniqueness is when we are able to really demonstrate that we're there. We're getting there. But Peter, it is so good talking to you. We'll
mhm.
meet again. Thank
Okay,
you so much for this time together,
thank you.
and uh, love to talk to you more about the subject. Bye
Okay,
bye, everyone.
bye bye. Thank you.